Ladies and gentlemen, nobody should be surprised about William Barr's recent statement. We saw what he said about a year ago when he was around law enforcement. According to him, everything happening to the Black community is pretty much our own fault. So this came out in the New York Times. Barr says there is no systematic racism in policing. Now, he knows he's lying, y'all. All of these dudes, they all know they're lying. But see, this is the kind of people that Trump wants on his staff. You know, people like him and the docile, indifferent Negro like Ben Carson. See, this is good people for his staff. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is June 7th, 2020. Attorney General William P. Barr said on Sunday that he did not believe racism was a systematic problem in policing, echoing other top administration officials' defense of an important part of President Trump's base as protest against police killings of unarmed Black people continues across the country. I don't think that the law enforcement system is systematically racist, Mr. Barr says. He knows he's lying, y'all. You know, Barr was alive during civil rights. He was. All right. And I saw pictures of him when he was younger. He didn't really look any better back then. This man never looked good. So anyway, let's get back to this. So Barr says, I don't think that law enforcement system is systematically racist, Mr. Barr said in an interview with CBS program Face the Nation. I think we have to recognize that for most of our history, our institutions were explicitly racist. Okay, this ain't nothing but word salad here, Barr. Okay, no, your whole system as far as policing is racist because it came about out of slave catching. Okay, so it can't be nothing other than a racist system, a racist law enforcement, the whole 9 yards. It can't be nothing but that because of the way it came about and the way it still functions to this very day. Chad Wolf, the acting secretary of Department of Homeland Security, made similar remarks on Sunday in an interview with This Week on ABC, saying that systematic racism was not an issue for law enforcement. And ladies and gentlemen, now you can see why Trump is doing nothing. See, he's not going to let anybody be on his staff that don't feel the way that he does. Again, he's not talking about reform. He's not talking about, in fact, he's against defunding the police, which he can't do nothing about anyway. And Trump only concern is getting the protesters off the street, not addressing the issues. So we definitely got an alt-right president in office for real. And so are his staff. His whole cabinet are a bunch of alt-right people. The defense mirrored comments made last week by the National Security Advisor, Robert C. O'Brien, and came as protests over the killing of George Floyd last month and racial injustice in policing continued to gain momentum. Nearly a decade ago, the killings of unarmed Black people, including Trayvon Martin, a teenager in Florida who was shot while walking home from the store, planted the seeds for Black Lives Matter movement, which protests racial profiling, racial inequality in the nation's prison, and policing issues, including excessive use of force, which we have seen all throughout protesting, by the way. It still did not stop happening. And you saw it happen to a 75-year-old white man. And I noticed they jumped up very quickly and fired 2 police officers, remember, for George Floyd, who was straight up murdered on the street. It took them 4 days before the first arrest happened. Mr. Barr and Mr. Wolf spoke the day before the president was scheduled to meet with local, state, and federal law enforcement officials at the White House. Trump, who has declared himself your president of law and order, in other words, president of oppression, because he might as well say that because we know what that means. He's a president of oppression. Needs the continued support of police officers and sheriffs, especially now that he has weakened in the polls, and evangelical Christians and other crucial parts of his base. A handful of top Republicans have also said that they will not support him in the upcoming election. Both Barr and Wolf condemn the death of Floyd as a tragedy, and the Attorney General has understood why Black people in the United States distrust law enforcement, given the history in this country. So you just contradicted yourself. You said there was no systematic racism, and then you turned around and confirmed how Black people feel. You can't go by nobody in this Trump administration. You can't go by Trump or anybody in his administration. Barr reiterated comments he made during a news conference on Thursday that he said that it was undeniable that many African Americans lack confidence in the American criminal justice system and that nothing less is acceptable than equal protection under the law. Yeah, but y'all babble up this nonsense, but you don't do it. You know, it's no action behind the words. See, as long as there's no action, you're content with saying it because there's no action behind the words. And this is what we absolutely must reject. I don't care about William Barr's acknowledgement of how African Americans get treated. You are the Attorney General. Do something about it. But you talking and don't go beyond that, I don't want to hear it. But he said that work done since the 1960s to reform racist institution more broadly is working, and progress has been made. No, it hasn't. There's no progress made. As long as Black people are continuously being profiled and shot and beaten out in the streets of America, no progress has been made. And don't let them get away with talking that nonsense to you. As long as we are the primary people being brutalized in America, no progress has been made. Don't let them get away with telling you progress has. No, it hasn't. Okay. In his view, he said police brutality against Black people was the work of a few bad apples. Well, a few bad apples spoils the whole bunch. Never forget that. Okay, these few people arguments and few bad apples and all that bad character. Don't listen to none of that, ladies and gentlemen. It is a whole system of people working against us for centuries, and don't let them try to convince you this is only a handful of people. If that's the case, how come you're not controlling those few people? How come you're letting the few people dominate everything? So a few people did this for hundreds of years, right? Well, how come y'all haven't done anything to put those few people in check? To that end, Mr. Barr told CBS that he did not support reducing the amount of immunity officers have when someone dies in their custody. See, this is what I'm saying. These folks are not about to change anything about the system, y'all. They know it's unfair. They see it. They know it exists. But as far as them doing anything, he's again letting you know we ain't doing nothing about it. We know it exists, but we're not doing nothing about it. That's exactly what he's saying. Such a change, he said, would result in certainly in police pullback. I frankly think that we have generally, the vast, overwhelmingly majority of police are good people. No, they're not. Because if you had good cops out here, then they would have gotten up and got Derek Chauvin off of the neck of George Floyd. The fact that there were 4 cops present, including Derek Chauvin, and nobody took a stand against what he was doing among those cops, no, none of them are good. None. Zero. So Barr goes on and said, I think there are instances of bad cops. Yeah, there's been instances of bad cops for centuries. How many more instances do we need before change is made? And I think we have to be careful about automatically assuming that the actions of an individual necessarily means that their organization is rotten. Yes, we can believe that because the organization originated from slave catching. So, yes, we can believe that. Yes, we can. While Mr. Barr flatly denies that there was systematic racism in policing, he compared law enforcement to the military, which said used to be explicitly a racist institution, and it still is. The only people that get promoted heavily in the military are white men. Anybody in the military can tell you that. It has never been fair. In fact, there's a track record of the military not even wanting black people to serve. And you still, and I talk to family members that are in the military, and they talk about all the racism in the US military. It's always been there, just like it's always been there in policing. I now think it is a vanguard of bringing the races together and providing equal opportunity, Mr. Barr said. I think law enforcement has been going through the same process. You know, ladies and gentlemen, just understand, if we had to depend on Trump, William Barr, anybody in his administration, you would be oppressed for an eternity, nonstop, if you had to depend on them to make change. But the people have spoken. But the Trump administration has blatantly tried to ignore it or speak out against racism, just like William Barr here. He refuses to speak out against it. When you make a statement that there is no systematic racism in policing, you just took a stand and you're saying that racism is not an issue, so therefore we don't have to do anything. That's exactly what that statement is saying. And ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the recent polls since all of the protesting has happened, Trump has plummeted in the polls big time. He knows all of this protesting is making him look bad, and his inaction is making him look even worse. And I noticed they are pulling back with the National Guard. But the police are worn out because they are protesting literally damn near around the clock. You got people out during the day, you got people out there at night. And hey, you have in your Constitution, people can protest. So I don't know why you would be complaining anyway. But y'all, please tell me what you think about this recent statement that this fat, overstuffed, overprivileged man just said. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.